The air in Kinshasa, Zaire, was thick with heat and anticipation on that fateful morning of October 30th, 1974. Muhammad Ali, once the most feared heavyweight in boxing, now stood as a 7-1 underdog against the seemingly unstoppable George Foreman. At 32 years old, many believed Ali's best days were behind him. The world watched with bated breath, wondering if they were about to witness the final downfall of a legend. Ali's journey to this moment had been anything but conventional. Years earlier, he had been stripped of his heavyweight title and banned from boxing for refusing military service during the Vietnam War. "I ain't got no quarrel with them Viet Cong," he had famously declared, standing firm on his religious beliefs and principles despite the devastating cost to his career. For 3.5 years, prime fighting years, he remained sidelined, his legacy hanging in the balance. Now, against all odds, he had clawed his way back to contention. But standing across the ring was George Foreman, a 6'3" wrecking machine who had demolished Joe Frazier, the man who had handed Ali his first professional defeat. Foreman was younger, stronger, and had knocked out 37 of his 40 opponents. The boxing world believed Ali was not just facing defeat, he was facing danger. As dawn broke over the stadium that would host what would later be known as the Rumble in the Jungle, Ali sat alone in his dressing room, a quiet storm brewing behind his eyes. His trusted trainer, Angelo Dundee, noticed something different in his fighter that morning, a calm determination that seemed to defy the overwhelming odds stacked against him. "You got a plan, don't you?" Dundee asked, studying Ali's serene expression. Ali's lips curled into that familiar, enigmatic smile. "Just watch me dance," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. But those who knew Muhammad Ali understood that his quiet moments often preceded his loudest statements. If this story has made you feel something already, no matter how small, don't leave without giving back. Comment and tell me where you're watching this video from, and subscribe to the channel. The hours before the fight were filled with Ali's characteristic bravado. To reporters, he proclaimed he would float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, against Foreman's raw power. But behind closed doors, he studied footage of Foreman's previous fights with methodical precision, looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything that might give him an edge against the younger champion's devastating power. What few people knew was that Ali had been harboring a secret strategy, one so counterintuitive that he had shared it with only his closest confidants. It was a strategy born not of arrogance, but of necessity, a recognition that he could no longer outbox a younger, stronger opponent through conventional means. He would need to outsmart him. As Ali stepped into the ring that night, a hush fell over the 60,000 spectators gathered in the open-air stadium. Foreman's entrance was met with respectful applause, but when Ali emerged, the crowd erupted in chants of "Ali Bomey," "Ali, kill him," in the local Lingala language. The people of Zaire had embraced Ali as their champion, seeing in his defiance of American authority a reflection of their own post-colonial pride. The first bell rang, and what happened next would confound boxing experts and rewrite the rules of the sport forever. The opening round began with a shock to everyone watching, including George Foreman. Rather than dancing away as expected, Muhammad Ali came out aggressive, throwing right-hand leads, a dangerous and unorthodox move against a power puncher. Foreman, momentarily confused by this unexpected approach, absorbed several clean punches before his instincts took over. "Is that all you got, George?" Ali taunted after landing a particularly sharp combination. "I heard they told me you could punch, George." Foreman's response was immediate and terrifying. He began throwing thunderous punches that would have felled any other heavyweight. The crowd gasped as Foreman unleashed his fury, driving Ali toward the ropes with the force of a freight train. Many spectators covered their eyes, unable to watch what seemed like the inevitable destruction of a boxing icon. But then something strange happened. Instead of trying to escape, Ali leaned back against the ropes. He covered his face with his gloves and his torso with his arms, using the elasticity of the ropes to absorb the impact of Foreman's punches. This was not part of the conventional boxing wisdom. It seemed suicidal. "Get off the ropes!" Angelo Dundee screamed from the corner, genuine fear in his voice. But Ali stayed put, occasionally glancing at his trainer with a look that said, "Trust me." Round after round, Foreman pounded away at Ali's arms and body. To the untrained eye, it appeared Ali was taking a beating. The television commentators speculated that he was trapped. Too tired to escape Foreman's onslaught, Howard Cosell, calling the fight for American television, gravely intoned, "Ali looks tired." This could be the end of an era. What nobody realized was that every punch Foreman threw required energy, enormous energy. And while some landed with force, many were being partially deflected by Ali's defensive shell or absorbed by the ropes themselves. All the while, Ali conserved his energy, whispering into Foreman's ear during clinches. "That all you got, George? Show me something. You're supposed to be bad." By the fifth round, a pattern had emerged. Foreman would furiously attack, Ali would cover and occasionally snap the champion's head back with surprising counterpunches. After each exchange, Foreman's breathing grew more labored, his movements more sluggish. What had appeared to be Ali's desperate defensive posture was revealing itself as something else entirely, a strategy. Later, it would become known as the rope-a-dope. In Ali's corner between rounds, Angelo Dundee had stopped questioning his fighter's approach. Instead, he applied ice to Ali's shoulders and neck, buying precious seconds of recovery while whispering encouragement. "You're doing it, champ. He's getting tired, but you gotta show me something now. Let your hands go when you see the opening." Ali nodded, his eyes clear and focused despite the punishment he'd absorbed. "But he's ready to go," Ali murmured. "Watch this next round." In the audience, Ali's friend and spiritual advisor, Drew Bundini, Brown clutched a towel nervously. He had been with Ali through his highest highs and lowest lows. He knew better than anyone the price Ali had paid for his principles and his pride. Watching his friend absorb punishment against the ropes, even Bundini's legendary faith was being tested. As the sixth round began, Foreman was visibly slower, his punches lacking the snap and power of the early rounds. The audience began to sense a shift in the fight's momentum. Ali, who had thrown relatively few punches, began picking his spots with greater frequency. His legendary reflexes, while diminished from his younger days, were still faster than Foreman's increasingly telegraphed attacks. Most importantly, Ali was conserving energy while Foreman was expending it. It was a battle of attrition, and against all expectations, the older fighter was winning it. By the seventh round, the unthinkable was happening before 60,000 pairs of disbelieving eyes. George Foreman, the unstoppable force of nature who had demolished Joe Frazier and Ken Norton, was visibly exhausted. His punches, once thrown with surgical precision and devastating power, now windmilled through the air as Ali evaded them with subtle movements. The crowd, sensing the momentum shift, began chanting "Ali, Ali" with increasing fervor. Even Howard Cosell's commentary had changed tone. "This is astounding. Foreman is clearly fatigued, and Ali, who we thought was finished, appears remarkably fresh." In Foreman's corner, his trainers were growing desperate. "You're letting him off the hook," they admonished. "He's an old man. Go finish him." But their fighters' eyes told a different story, one of confusion and growing doubt. How could Ali still be standing, still taunting, still dangerous after absorbing so much punishment? What nobody in the arena fully understood was that Ali's strategy extended beyond the physical. Throughout the fight, during clinches and breaks, he had been whispering to Foreman, getting inside his head with a psychological warfare as effective as any punch. "George, this is the wrong place for you to be tired," Ali murmured during one clinch in the 7th round. The comment, delivered with Ali's characteristic mixture of humor and menace, registered on Foreman's face as a flash of concern. As the bell rang for the 8th round, Ali returned to his corner with a surprising spring in his step. Angelo Dundee, sensing the moment, delivered simple instructions. "He's yours for the taking. Don't let him off the hook." Ali nodded, a predator's focus replacing the defensive shell he'd maintained for much of the fight. He knew something that even his corner didn't fully grasp. Foreman wasn't just tired. He was broken in spirit. The psychological dam was about to burst. When the 8th round began, Ali moved differently. Gone was the static target on the ropes. Instead, he began to circle, forcing the exhausted Foreman to turn, to reset his feet, to expend precious remaining energy just tracking his opponent. Then came the moment that would be etched into boxing history forever. Midway through the round, Foreman launched a desperate combination. Ali, reading the telegraphed punches with ease, slipped the first two and countered with a lightning-fast right cross that snapped Foreman's head back. For the first time in the fight, Foreman was hurt. Sensing vulnerability, Ali unleashed a combination of his own, a left hook, a straight right, another left. Each punch landed with surgical precision. Foreman, his legs betraying him, stumbled backward. Ali, like a shark sensing blood, followed with relentless purpose. The final sequence came with just seconds remaining in the round. Ali, backed against the ropes one last time, unleashed a 6-punch combination that culminated in a right cross that seemed to travel through time itself. A punch thrown with the speed and power of the young Cassius Clay rather than the 32-year-old veteran. The punch caught Foreman flush on the jaw. For a brief moment, the champion's eyes went blank, consciousness fleeing before his body knew to fall. Then, like a great tree finally succumbing to the persistent axe, George Foreman began to topple. The crowd rose as one, a roar building from deep within the African night as Foreman spiraled toward the canvas. Ali, rather than rushing to a neutral corner, stood watching his fallen opponent with a mixture of triumph and respect. He had pulled off the impossible. The referee's count reached 10. Muhammad Ali had regained the heavyweight championship of the world in perhaps the most improbable comeback in sports history. As the reality of his achievement washed over him, Ali raised his gloves to the heavens, his face a portrait of vindication. He had been stripped of his title for standing on principle. He had been told he was too old, too slow, too vulnerable to reclaim his throne. And yet here he stood, once again the king of boxing's most prestigious division. In his corner, Angelo Dundee wept openly. Bundini Brown danced in circles, shouting, "Ali Bomaye," along with the delirious crowd, and in rings across the world, a generation of young fighters watched in awe, learning that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from power, but from patience, not from dominance, but from endurance. In the aftermath of the rumble in the jungle, the boxing world struggled to make sense of what they had witnessed. Experts who had predicted Ali's demise were forced to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about the sweet science. The rope-a-dope strategy, allowing a stronger opponent to punch themselves into exhaustion, became part of boxing lexicon overnight. But for Muhammad Ali, the victory represented something far beyond tactical brilliance. As he sat in his dressing room after the fight, surrounded by jubilant supporters yet strangely quiet himself, he seemed to be processing the deeper meaning of his achievement. "They took my title for standing up for what I believed," he told a small group of reporters who had managed to squeeze into the crowded room. "Tonight, I took it back with these," he added, raising his swollen hands. The impact of Ali's victory extended far beyond sport. For the millions who had supported his stance against the Vietnam War, his triumph was vindication. For Black Americans still fighting for equality, he remained a symbol of unapologetic excellence and principle. And for the people of Africa, who had embraced him as their champion, his victory in Zaire represented a kind of poetic justice, the descendant of slaves returning to the continent of his ancestors to reclaim his crown. In the days following the fight, Ali remained in Zaire, visiting villages and schools, being embraced by ordinary people who saw in him a reflection of their own struggles and aspirations. These encounters, away from the cameras and the global spotlight, revealed the man behind the mythology, a complex individual whose impact transcended his sport. "I shook up the world," Ali had famously declared after defeating Sonny Liston to win his first heavyweight title a decade earlier. With the rope-a-dope and his victory over Foreman, he had done it again, but in a different way. The young Ali had shocked the world with his speed and audacity. The mature Ali had amazed it with his resilience and psychological mastery. Back in America, the ripple effects of Ali's victory continued to spread. Young boxers studied footage of the fight, trying to understand how the aging challenger had dismantled the seemingly invincible champion. But what many failed to grasp was that the rope-a-dope wasn't just a tactic. It was a philosophy disguised as a fighting style. "You don't have to be stronger than your problems," Ali explained months later when asked about the strategy. "You just have to outlast them." This principle would define the later years of Ali's career and life. When he lost his title to Leon Spinks in 1978, he regained it 7 months later, becoming the first 3-time heavyweight champion in history. When Parkinson's disease began to rob him of his physical abilities in the 1980s, he faced this new opponent with the same grace and determination he had shown against Foreman. Perhaps the most powerful legacy of the rope-a-dope strategy was how it came to symbolize resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. Civil rights activists, anti-apartheid protesters, and ordinary people facing seemingly insurmountable challenges all found inspiration in Ali's approach, absorbing pressure, conserving energy, and waiting for the perfect moment to transform defense into offense. "The fight is won or lost, far away from witnesses," Ali once said. "So, behind the lines, in the gym, and out there on the road long before I dance under those lights." This insight, that victory is often secured in invisible moments of preparation and perseverance rather than in dramatic public displays, became part of Ali's enduring wisdom. It transformed him from merely a great boxer into a philosopher of resilience whose teachings transcended sport. In later years, as Parkinson's progressively limited his physical capabilities, Salah continued to demonstrate the principles that had guided him in the ring. Unable to float like a butterfly, he showed the world how to stand with dignity against an undefeatable opponent. The man who had once been defined by his voice and charisma found new ways to communicate, his silence sometimes more powerful than his words had ever been. When Ali lit the Olympic torch at the 1996 Atlanta Games, his hand trembling with the effects of his disease, the moment became a metaphor for his journey, the fire of his spirit still burning bright despite the limitations of his body. It was the rope-a-dope translated into life, enduring, adapting, refusing to be defeated by circumstances. For generations of athletes who followed, Muhammad Ali's victory over George Foreman provided a template not just for how to win, but for how to approach life's biggest challenges. The lesson was clear. Sometimes, when facing overwhelming force, the path to victory lies not in matching power with power, but in strategic patience and psychological strength. What began as a desperate gambit by an aging fighter had become something much more significant, a parable about resilience that continues to resonate decades later. The image of Ali, backed against the ropes yet somehow in control, remains one of sport's most powerful symbols of the indomitable human spirit. If you've made it this far and felt every word, don't leave without subscribing. I tell these stories with my heart in my hand to reach people like you who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video.